achieved.
I've never actually been so happy to get a prediction wrong. And that means a lot coming from me because I was actually having a really good show. I went 10-3 overall, but to get the main event wrong and see Michael Bisping awarded a decision over Anderson Silva made me very, very happy. And first and foremost is because I like Michael Bisping. I felt it was a bad matchup if Anderson fought to his full potential. And I thought he should have been able to beat Michael Bisping had he fought to his full potential. But Bisping came out, he fought an excellent game plan. He did not let Anderson get into his head. And Anderson did all that garbage he usually does and tries to frame his approach with these hand motions and just idiocy in the cage that has worked from the past, but it appears to be not working for him anymore. And Bisping hurt him, outworked him, and clearly won rounds 1, 2, and 4. Anybody who tells you different is fucking delusional. And I don't swear a lot online. I try not to, but it's worth it. They're delusional. Anderson hurt him at the end of round 3. Didn't knock him out, hurt him badly. Really had him in a lot of trouble. But the round ended with Anderson trying to convince everybody by being up in the cage saying, no, I've knocked him out. That shows how desperate he was at the time to cling to the fact that he hurt him and knocked him down but didn't finish him. If he'd have swarmed him and there'd been a couple seconds left in the round, maybe different story. But obviously Herb didn't stop the fight, and that's Anderson's fault. And the other thing that's Anderson's fault is I felt, okay, he's lost round 1 and 2, he's clearly won round 3, he's hurt him, he'll either come out and finish him, or he's going to pour it on in rounds 4 and 5 and take a decision. And in round 4, he comes out and he does the exact same bullshit, hands it right back to Bisping. Bisping takes it to him, fights a better round, fights a better, more focused game plan, actually fights, wins round 4. Anderson, again, better in round 5, wins the round, but loses a decision. Looks good on him. He looks like an idiot. It's not corrupt. It was the appropriate decision, and it looks really good in Anderson Silva, and I want to see him get in there again because I'd love to see him either do one or two things. Fight again and fight appropriately and properly and aggressively and actually fight, or get beat again and then call it a quits, take his ball and go home. Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson. On this episode of the show, we're breaking the upcoming UFC 196 card, which will take place on March 5th, featuring a welterweight main event between the featherweight champion Conor McGregor and former lightweight title challenger Nate Diaz, interestingly enough. We also have a co-main event, which will feature the women's bantamweight champion Holm taking on former Strikeforce champion and UFC title challenger Miesha Tate. I'll be giving you my 5 main card predictions on this episode of the show. All of my preliminary breakdowns will be available at my website, along with a number of other very valuable pieces of information. You can go and check out what the public's picking, vote in the polls. You can check out the prediction panel. You can, I have a new poster, and again, I'm forgetting his DraftKings username, which he's going by, but you can see it there. He's posting some DraftKings information and breakdowns. And also, you can buy my bet packs. And I did talk about my website. I mentioned it's on the site. I'm talking about it now. I'm upping the price of my bet packs slightly, from $10 to $12. I'm coming off a very good show. I produced, I think it was 110 units and 110 winning units, or units won, whatever. Nonetheless, there's a lot more work going into because I am doing the fantasy breakdowns as well and DraftKings lineups. Also, we're getting more events with 12, 13, and 14. We had one was scheduled for 14 and a half, but still, it's a lot more work to break all those fights down. And as opposed to before, we were having 10, 11, and the utmost was 12. So I'm upping it by $2. It's still probably the best deal online. You compare it to other people, and I won't mention names, but I went to one individual site, and he's giving you his premium picks for a month for $130. So if you have 3 shows in a month, you do the math. For that same price, you can get almost 12 of my bet packs at $12 a pop. And I'm breaking down everything. A lot of guys like to sell you this bullshit where they're specialized and they give you 3 picks. Well, what if they're the 3 picks you don't want to bet on? What if they're the 3 fights you don't give a shit about? That's what I like to do. I try to go in and give you information on every single fight. And yes, I'll say, yeah, this fight's a tough one to bet on. Here's the best option to bet it on. Here's a prop. Here's what I think is the best way to go about this. Or just leave it the fuck alone. Clearly, I'm fired up a little bit. I don't know why. It's the Anderson Silva effect. Nonetheless, $12. I think you can understand I'm putting all this extra work in. It's only $2 more. It's still cheaper than anywhere else. And I'm doing my best to produce. On that note, 5 main card fights. Follow me on Twitter at KO_predictions. So check me out there, YouTube channel, Facebook, all that wonderful jazz. Let's get to that first main card prediction, folks. Our first prediction comes to us in the UFC's women's bantamweight division as the number 4 ranked Amanda the Lioness Nunes, 11-4-0, battles the Bullet, 11th ranked Valentina Shevchenko, with a current record of 12 wins and 1 loss. Now, both girls are taking a big step towards title contention with this fight, with the winner possibly being in line for a shot at the title, depending on what Ronda Rousey manages to get her, if she gets her head on straight and opts to ball up and step in there again. And if Holmes gets a quick win, she might want a quick turnaround, and the winner of this fight would be prime potentially to go, depending on how much damage they take. Valentina comes from a Muay Thai and kickboxing background, has a reported record of 60 wins and 2 losses in those competitions. She has a win over Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Oh, she's a bigger fighter, but still Joanna very talented. Second degree black belt in Taekwondo as well. For the Brazilian, Nunes, BJJ black belt, brown belt in judo, 9 wins by knockout, 2-1 in fights ended by submission, 0-1 on the scorecards. She also has 2 losses by knockout as well. Shevchenko, her MMA record, 4-1 in fights ended by knockout, 5-0 in fights ended by submission, surprisingly enough, but those all came very early in her career, 3-0 in the scorecards. She has one knockout loss on her record came due to retirement back in 2010 against Liz Carmouche. And keep in mind, when she fought Sarah Kaufman in her UFC debut, she took it on relatively short notice and came out with a very strong performance. Physically, Nunes is a monster. 3 inches taller, 2-inch reach advantage. They are the same age. And keep in mind, Nunes, this will be her 6th fight inside the UFC, also fighting in Strikeforce. For Shevchenko, this is only her 2nd fight inside the Octagon. She fought in Legacy former to that, and is relatively still not new to the MMA game, but doesn't have the experience that Nunes has. The first scenario that's worth looking at is, as far as Nunes is concerned, she is 9-1 in fights ended in the first round. That's damn impressive, especially in a division not known for early finishes for the majority of the participants. But after that, she has a record of 2 wins and 3 losses after the opening round, and she has lost her last 3 fights to go beyond the first 5 minutes. Her cardio is not good, especially if she's put in bad spots. Her cardio fails. She dominated Kat Zingano in the opening round and then failed, and Kat almost stopped her before the first round was over, took it to her, and eventually finished her in round 3. For Shevchenko, 7-0 in fights that end in the opening round, also a capable first-round finisher. She is coming off back-to-back decision wins, 5 of her last 6 fights to go more than 2 rounds. She is 5-0 in that span, and 6-1 overall in fights that have gone into the second round or beyond. So the big question is, how does Nunes hold up if she can't finish in the opening round? Again, she was exhausted trying to finish Kat Zingano, almost finished at the end of that round. If she can find a way to manage her output and not exhaust herself, that bodes well for her. Against Kat Zingano, I'm going back to that fight because I find some parallels there, and it's one of her highest profile matchups. She took Zingano down right away, moved right to a dominant top position, jumped and really did damage when she fought Germaine Dirandami, who's also a striking-based fighter. The first time Dirandami opened up, Nunes jumped on her, took her down from the clinch, which transitioned to a single leg and eventually ground and pound for the finish. So you see what her mentality is probably going to be here. She's exceptionally strong. She's hard to get off of, get her off of you once she gets on. Big time ground and pound. If she can posture up and start unloading, look out, she will do a ton of damage. And she'll stand up and launch punches down. That can be a very effective technique. When she fought Sarah McMahon made all her attempts to get the fight to the ground. Olympic wrestler, early taken attempts, very successful as far as Nunes was concerned, knocking her off. She hurt McMahon with a knee, ragdolled her in the clinch, and eventually beat her up. Now, Shevchenko, she has scored a number of clinch-based takedowns against Sarah Kaufman. She showed herself to be very strong in the position. Actually, against Gian Finney, she had success too, taking her down in her final non-UFC fight. She's got some pretty strong counter takedowns. Again, Sarah went for a takedown, and Shevchenko completely countered and actually moved into full mount the instant they hit the mat. We did see Shevchenko, though, taken down in the third round and beaten up on the ground. That's probably a product of the fact that she was fighting on such short notice. What Shevchenko does exceptionally well when striking, she's very good hands, very quick, straight combinations. She was countering Kaufman very effectively. Throws a nice liver kick, a lot of spinning techniques, back fists, spinning back kicks. Very efficient with her movement, moves very well. She can do a lot of damage in the clinch. She has some nice knees in the clinch that are very quick. She turns them over nicely and really digs them in. Nunes on the feet is no slouch, and she is incredibly dangerous. Hard low kicks, spinning attacks as well, straight combinations. I love the way in a couple of her fights, especially against Kaufman, she was rolling her against McMahon, she was rolling her shoulders back and landing short punch counters when Kaufman would come in and attack. Nunes throws everything with power, body shots, and she actually took out McMahon when she missed a low kick and countered her and hurt her. I think Shevchenko's striking, her speed, and her footwork are going to give Nunes a ton of trouble closing that gap. She's going to counter. Nunes has kind of a big windup when she attacks. She's going to counter those big windups with much more short, crisp techniques. The kicking and punching of Nunes can be effective if it lands. If it doesn't land, it's not worth a damn. I think Nunes is going to chase the takedowns and strikes. It's ultimately going to slow down. We're going to see what happens when Shevchenko has a full camp. That's going to be to her benefit. Valentina has to endure those early attacks. I think she will. I think she'll start to take over in rounds 2 and 3, use the clinch takedowns, top pressure, and my prediction is Valentina Shevchenko to defeat Amanda Nunes by TKO. Fight number 2 in the main card has us in the light heavyweight division with the first of 2 light heavyweight bouts on the pay-per-view as the 12th ranked Corey Beaston 25-8. Oh, I cringe when I say that. Corey Anderson 8-1 takes on Filthy Tom Lawlor, their current record of 9 wins, 5 losses, and 1 no contest. This is kind of an odd fight for a couple of reasons. Anderson is coming to this matchup after getting knocked out by Gian Villante, yet he's still ranked. Tom Lawler's coming to this fight having knocked out Gian Villante, yet he's not ranked. And now they're actually both fighting below Villante on pay-per-view. So kind of it's the product of the bullshit ranking system that the UFC employs. And how they just do whatever the fuck they want when it comes to putting predictions together. Lawlor has been, interesting to note as far as experience, Lawler's been fighting since 2007. He has only 16 total fights since that time. Had a 2-year layoff coming into the Villante matchup. While Anderson has been fighting professionally since 2013, has 8 total fights. So kind of activity has been a big factor for Anderson, Corey Anderson. Physically, Corey is 3 inches taller, he'll have a 5-inch reach advantage. He's 6 years younger. Obviously, Lawlor coming up from middleweight, having formerly fought there. Both guys have collegiate wrestling backgrounds. Lawlor a BJJ purple belt, Anderson a BJJ blue belt. Now, Anderson has picked up back-to-back wins since his first career loss to the aforementioned Villante. He's looked very good in both those matchups. And for Lawlor, his last 2 fights, he beat Michael Kuiper after suffering an injury and getting beaten up in the first round. He pulled off a Hail Mary submission. And then against Gian Villante, he was getting absolutely destroyed in the opening round and busted up on the feet and then knocked him out cold in the second round. So it's kind of been like lose, 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 and I'm going to win this fight now. Anderson coming into this matchup, wrestling has been a key factor in his success. 4.73 takedowns per fight at a 50% completion rate. He landed 6 takedowns against the takedown-prone Fabio Maldonado, 4 against Jan Blachowicz, and 7 against, I believe it was Justin Jones. He works exceptionally well from the clinch, keeps very active both in the clinch and on top position once he gets to the mat. Lawler's takedown numbers, 53% takedown defense, so he needs to make sure he stays vertical in this fight. He averages 2.73 takedowns at a 30% completion rate, so not exactly earth-shattering numbers. Took down Francis Carmont twice in a pretty lackluster affair, which he probably got robbed in. Most takedowns on his record occurred earlier in his career. He gave up 1 versus Gian Villante. Michael Kuiper took him down 3 times. He had a lot of trouble as to taking down Carmont. Same with Kuiper. He tends to get stalled out a lot in the clinch looking for takedowns. And when he can't score takedowns, it takes away one of his key offensive weapons. As I said, he was taken down multiple times by Kuiper. He was been submitted twice off his back. So certainly the ground has not been it's kind of been a live and die scenario where if he gets it there in a good position, okay, good. Tends to not get it there in a good position, okay, bad. Which that's a kind of a weird scenario that usually that's how it works. Bad is bad, good is good. Anderson, he works very well in the clinch. He can bully his opponent to the cage, lands knees, short punches. He has a strong double leg shot. He will switch to the single leg and continue to drive through if he doesn't get the initial attempt. Once on the mat, he tends to sit in guard. He will do a lot of damage, posture up. He has long limbs, a big torso, which allows him to posture up and drop big shots. He'll land elbows. He can hit his opponent where they can't hit him because of those long limbs. He was taken down by Blachowicz, but again, he got up very quickly, and that was pretty much it for Jan's offense in that fight. When Anderson lost to Gian Villante, he was getting lit up on the feet, cracked at distance. His lead leg was getting chewed up, which was taking away a lot of his... going back. This is Lawlor. He was getting cracked at distance when he was forced to exchange with Villante. His lead leg was getting absolutely chewed up. He was routinely trying to land a straight left, but he actually was having more success with the right hook when he was landing, and he KO'd him with a counter right hook as he came forward in the second round, as he did not look good up until that scenario. Anderson had a lot of same situations, getting beat up with the leg kicks by Villante. He had more success in that fight than what Lawlor did up until the knockout, and then he eventually got knocked out. What Anderson does well, he's constantly moving. A lot of lateral movement, throws a left jab, pumps it in his opponent's face, puts combinations together, and then will shoot for a takedown, which is a nice way to set it up. He is still rounding out a striking game. He took a lot of damage in the Villante fight. It seems like he's learned from that. Checking kicks should be an important part of his game, even though I don't know. Lawlor doesn't throw a ton of them. Could Lawlor hit that Hail Mary knockout again? Possibly, but not likely. I think Anderson will use his reach here. He'll use his movement, his volume, his speed at distance, and also his size once he gets in close to generally outwork and control Lawlor, dictate where the fight takes place. Look for Anderson to close in the clinch, control Lawlor on the cage, take him down, beat him up from guard, and my prediction is Corey Anderson to defeat Filthy Tom Lawlor by decision. Sticking in the same division, that aforementioned, number 13th ranked Gian Villante, 14 wins, 6 losses, takes on the sledgehammer Ilir Latifi of Sweden with a current record of 12 wins, 4 losses, and 1 no contest. This is a big fight for both men. Villante has looked much improved over his last couple of fights, with the exception of the knockout against Lawlor in a fight, as I said, he was winning. He trains with Chris Weidman, so you have to wonder, training with the former middleweight champion and elite middleweight has to be rubbing off on a guy and getting him to a point. And he had a slow start in Strikeforce and eventually rounded out and started having a lot of success. And we're kind of seeing a similar arc in his UFC run. For Latifi, he's not ranked at light heavyweight, which is shocking considering how thin the division is. It's probably because he's not getting the respect he deserves, because he has looked fantastic. He has 4 first-round finishes, with the last 2 coming in under a minute, again against unranked opposition, but, Rafael Feijóo is ranked in the top 15 people. Get real, let's go. He was an afterthought in the Mousasi fight where he was injury replacement. He's actually made a lot of noise in the division since. And he trains with Alexander Gustafsson, so again, training with an elite light heavyweight, that's going to rub off. Physically, Villante is 5 inches taller. He'll have a 3-inch reach advantage. He's 2 years younger, but Latifi is built like a fire hydrant. The guy's a brick shithouse, if you will. And he's not the type of guy, he's a monster. Villante, 9 wins by knockout, 8 first-round finishes, 2-0 in fights ended by submission, 3-3 on the scorecards. He does have 3 losses by knockout on his record, but a couple interesting scenarios. One was due to injury early in his career. One was against the gravedigger Chad Griggs at heavyweight in a Strikeforce tournament alternate bout. And then, of course, the most recent one against Tom Lawlor. He's a BJJ blue belt, has a collegiate wrestling background as well. For Latifi, 5-2 in fights ended by knockout, 4-0 in fights ended by submission, 2-2 in the scorecards. Swedish national wrestler. He was knocked out in the UFC by Jan Blachowicz. Again, I'm probably mispronouncing that. It came via body shot and then eventual follow-up punches, but it was the body shot that was the affirmative blow. Looking at some of the stats here, Villante averages 4.09 strikes landed per minute, which is a pretty good number, but 5.7 strikes absorbed per minute, which is scary. Compared to Latifi, just 1.91 strikes landed per minute, which is shocking, versus 4.12 strikes absorbed per minute, which is skewed by an 80-strike performance by Mousasi in his debut. But if you look at what Latifi has done, and this is why his numbers are so low, his career high in the UFC for strikes landed in a fight is 18 when he got beat by Mousasi and outstruck 80-18. That's his career high, 18 strikes in a fight. He had 2 in the loss to Gian, 25 combined strikes in his 4 UFC wins. Hasn't gone beyond the first round in victory since 2012, but keep that in mind, 25 combined strikes. He didn't land a single strike when he submitted, a significant strike anyway, when he submitted Cyril Diabate. He's only needed a few strikes to put guys away in violent fashion. Now, Villante, as I said, he's looked much better of late. His leg strikes have really picked up and have looked very good. His combinations have improved. He's much more active in the early going. His striking has looked very sharp. He throws a solid left jab, right low kick, will go high as well once he starts softening up the lower half of his opponent's body. His power is in his big right hand. As I said, he obliterated the lead leg of Corey Anderson with those low kicks, took away his movement. That's something he's probably going to look for in this fight. He hurt Anderson with that brutal right late in the round and eventually put him away. He knocked out Anthony Prosh with a devastating right hand as well, and he'll mix in a pretty good uppercut. The thing with Villante is he tends to slow down. And the other thing I don't like about him is he covers up a lot when he's under attack. When he was getting blitzed by Corey Anderson, he was just covering up and waiting for it to subside. And instead of moving away and trying to avoid taking damage, he's just hoping it doesn't inflict too much damage. His offense tends to drop off in the second half of fights. He will slow down. He was losing the third round against Anderson before knocking him out. He tends at times to get too aggressive. That leads to him getting countered. We have seen a little bit more of a patient striker, especially against Lawlor and against Prosh. He was a little more patient, a little more calculated, equals less damage, and should improve his cardio as the fight progresses. Looking at Ilir Latifi, he launches himself forward with attacks. He's like a tank. Prolonged periods of time though where he does nothing, and that's the thing. He'll look for his openings, and especially if he can't find them, he kind of gets stuck at the outside looking for a chance to unload. He'll throw a right jab and then fire a straight left behind it. Again, as I said, his body was the main area for his UFC knockout that got targeted, that finished him. Threw some nice hard low kicks against Dempsey, which actually took him off balance and led to the eventual knockout. Short fights overall have not showcased what he's capable of over a long matchup with a full camp behind him. How he holds up with his offense over a 3-round fight, we'll see if that's a factor here. Again, he stopped Dempsey with a beautiful right hand after setting up with some low kicks. He KO'd Sean O'Connell with a right hand, and he KO'd Hans Stringer with a brutal straight right when Hans Stringer threw a low kick, and he countered it with that straight right, and that's what I'm anticipating seeing here. What I look at is Villante gets hit a lot, and he tends to cover up when he's under attack, as I said, which is going to allow Latifi to land big strikes, and he has that one-hitter-quitter power. If he hits you once, even if it's through a guard, it's going to do damage. Villante also tends to throw a lot of kicks in succession, and at times I think he gets a little bit lazy, doesn't set them up properly. His opponent can see them coming, and that can lead to him getting tagged. I think he's going to get countered in this matchup when he throws a low kick. If he slows down, he'll become more vulnerable to Latifi, who moves very well for a big man. I anticipate his cardio should be a little bit better than Villante's in a longer fight. He's also been knocked out twice, as I said, and I think his chin is vulnerable if he gets tagged. The height of Villante is also going to leave him open for a power strike over the top. And my prediction is Ilir Latifi, my apologies, to defeat Gian Villante by knockout. Up next, we have our only title fight now on this card, and it happens to be the co-main event, as Holm, the preacher's daughter, the rowdy executioner, undefeated at 10-0, takes on the number 2 ranked fighter in the division, Cupcake Miesha Tate, with a current record of 17 wins and 5 losses. Now, Tate is getting another shot at the title, and this is what she wanted. It seemed like she was either going to be retire or fight for the title. She's 0-2 in title fights when taking on Ronda Rousey for both the Strikeforce and UFC belts. She did beat Marlos Kunin to capture the Strikeforce title fight way back in the day. For Holm, a lot of pressure on her coming into this matchup, because if she loses this fight, the aura that has been created and the momentum she has created by beating Ronda Rousey dissipates immediately. It would be a huge letdown, very much like George St. Pierre when he won the title from Matt Hughes and then, boom, knocked out by GSP. It's like, oh. Now, obviously, George recovered from that and went on to have a relatively successful career, but nonetheless, that's a big setback. Physically, Holm, 2 inches taller, 4-inch reach advantage. Tate is the younger fighter by 5 years. Now, Holly, 7 wins by knockout, 3 by decision. She has 0 first-round finishes, though. Keep that in mind. All her stoppages have come in the 2nd or 3rd round and 1 in the 5th. So it shows you how measured she is and how calculated she is with her striking. It's also, obviously, we saw what she did against Ronda Rousey. She has several kick-related knockouts. Leg kick TKO, 2 body kick knockouts, and now 3 head kick knockouts coming off her last fight. For Tate, she comes from a wrestling background. BJJ purple belt, last time I checked. 3 wins by knockout in her career, 6 wins by submission. She is 8-1 on the scorecards, which is pretty damn good. Does have 2 losses by knockout, 2 losses by submission, both to Ronda. What we have here at the heart of this fight is a striker versus a grappler. Holm overcame the judo of her last opponent. Can't you do the same with the wrestling of Miesha Tate? There's a big difference when you compare what Tate offers versus what the former champion offered. Is that Rousey had to close the distance first before she could get in range to use her judo. She had to get her hands on Holly Holm before she could go to work with her grappling. Miesha Tate's takedowns are going to incorporate having to close the distance, shooting from the outside. Now, whether she'll be successful or not, another story, but I would say she'll probably be a little bit better at closing that gap. That's big. But the question is, once she gets a hold of Holly Holm, if she can close that gap, is she strong enough to drag her to the fight, to the ground, and keep her there? Holly Holm is exceptionally strong, and we saw against Ronda Rousey, very adept at getting out of bad positions. Holly's footwork and overall grappling defense is going to make it very hard for Miesha Tate to close that gap and then do anything once she gets there. She's going to be doing a lot of chasing. Holly, as it manages that distance exceptionally well, uses her kicking game to both attack opponents and defend against their ability to get on the inside. I would say Holly's kicking game is probably better than her overall boxing, despite coming from a boxing background. She uses that push kick to create distance. She'll throw that oblique kick in a similar fashion. It seems like at times those kicks are used to maintain more distance than anything, but they obviously can do damage. We saw what the head kick did against Ronda, how lethal it can be, and beautifully set up as well. Now, Tate, she's improved her striking. We saw her hurt Jessica Ai, which kind of turned that fight in her favor. It's still an area that she can't toy with against Holly Holm. It would just be an utter mistake. We saw her get cracked and hurt against Sarah McMahon. She's double tough, but again, Sarah McMahon's not an elite level striker, and she hurt her. She was able to recover. She tends to carry her left hand low, which is going to open her up to that right high kick if that's what Holly Holm opts to throw, and I think that's something we could see in this fight. We saw Tate land some decent strikes against McMahon, but again, I keep reiterating, McMahon's not the type of striker Holly Holm is by any stretch of the imagination, so Tate showcased her striking there. That would, again, be a mistake. What Tate needs to focus on is making this a dog fight and dragging the fight to the ground. 2.31 takedowns at a 35% completion rate. Not fantastic numbers. Efficient and capable when she gets the fight to the ground. Can she get the fight to the ground? She can be smothering in top position once she gets there, and she's a very adept grappler, but I don't know if she's going to be able to get there. I keep going back to that. When she tries to showcase her striking or is forced to showcase her striking, she has had some major issues. Kat Zingano destroyed her in the second half of that match, even though Miesha was doing very well early in that fight. And go back to that Julie Kedzie. Julie Kedzie absolutely knocked the snot out of her back in Strikeforce. And again, Miesha rallied and picked up the armbar submission in that fight, but it was still showcasing how dangerous, how the issues Miesha can have defensively. Holm has allowed opponents to back her up. That's the one concern I have. Allowed her opponents to back her up. Kind of that Machida-esque thing where she's doing it on purpose, but it's allowing them to look aggressive. Pennington did have success when she was brawling and coming forward aggressively and landing some shots. And we'll have to see if Miesha can do something similar. If she can close that distance. Without taking damage, that's a big key. And then get the fight to the ground, that's also a big key. I don't think she can. Holm's going to maintain that distance. She's going to counter-strike. She's going to hurt Miesha Tate at some point during the first, probably not the first round, the way her reputation goes, but rounds 2 or 3, she'll pick her apart at some point and really land something significant, especially as Miesha gets more desperate. And my prediction is Holm to defeat Miesha Tate by knockout. And now, ladies and gentlemen, my prediction of the fight we've all been waiting for about 2 weeks since it was announced. The welterweight clash between the featherweight champion, the notorious Conor McGregor, 19-2-0, and the notoriously lightweight and not so great against natural welterweights, Nate Diaz, with a current record of 19 wins and 10 losses. Stockton, what? Short notice fight for Diaz. He said Conor had to bag him. Clearly someone did put the money, showed him the money, and got this matchup. It just shows how corrupt and bullshit the UFC is when it comes to stuff like this. Donald Cerrone seemed like a much better and more practical option. He was more willing, openly said, I want the fight. That's not what Nate did. Cerrone had just fought earlier, didn't take a lot of damage. He was in shape, had just fought for the title, so there's that connection there against the champion. He said he could easily make 155, making this fight still remain relevant to the fight that was supposed to take place, and the UFC says, no, let's fight Nate Diaz at 170 pounds. And part of the reason for that is they probably feel stylistically Nate's a much better matchup for Conor than Cerrone is. Additionally, if Conor happens to lose 170 pounds, well, technically he didn't lose 155, so why can't he fight for the title next time if that's what he wants? So that's what we're looking at here. McGregor, change of opponent, how much does that affect him? No longer for a title, how much does that affect his mentality? I think he's still motivated. He has a lot to lose if he loses this matchup. So does the UFC, by the way. Nate Diaz, 3 inches taller, 2-inch reach advantage. He is 3 years older than his Irish opponent. They say he's in good shape. He looked in phenomenal shape against Michael Johnson. Conor has really beefed up for this fight, and at 170 pounds, even though he was cutting for 155, that should help him not draining himself even further. Here are some of the numbers. Conor, 17 wins by knockout, 1-2 in fights ended by submission, 1-0 in the scorecard. So it's basically been knockout or bust for the notorious one. 6 UFC knockouts, that's damn impressive. 4 in the first round. Max Holloway, the only man to go the distance with him. He has 2 knockouts in the second round. He has 13 first overall finishes. Nate Diaz, 4 wins by knockout, 11 wins by submission. He is 3-8 in the scorecards. 1 loss by knockout, which came against Josh Thompson. Also has 1 loss by submission again. I believe WEC Hermes Franca was the man that submitted him way back in the day. I could be wrong. Correct me if I am. The key to beating Nate Diaz has been power wrestling and a kick-heavy assault. Both Benson Henderson and Rafael dos Anjos executed those, and Josh Thompson, to a lesser extent, executed that approach to a T. Conor McGregor has a pretty solid kicking arsenal. He has shown his wrestling, his win over Max Holloway, but again, much smaller opponent, not his style. I really doubt we'll see Conor shooting double legs in this fight, at least if everything is going swimmingly for the featherweight champ. Conor McGregor moves exceptionally well. He fights very long. How does that hold up at a heavier weight class against a long opponent? He covers distance, which is good, and that speed should come in handy. And a lot of kicking techniques, spinning techniques, a lot of nice front leg techniques that he will throw, which should help him close the distance against Nate Diaz. The big weapon he has, though, is that clean left hand, the Celtic Cross, which Robin Black, who does some exceptional work with his breakdowns. I love watching his breakdowns. They make me feel like I have marbles in my mouth and I'm mumbling mumbo jumbo and throwing baloney to wall and see which one sticks when I talk about picking fights, because he does such a great job. But again, Conor McGregor snakes that left hand across very quickly. A lot of casual movement, and boom, right there, cracks his opponent. The one thing with Conor, though, he can be hit. Overhand right from Chad Mendes was routinely getting through. Dennis Seaver had some success landing a left hand with some regularity, and that's what Nate Diaz is looking to do, hit you a lot, and we'll see how that holds up. Nate is a very good grappler. High-volume boxer more is his biggest asset, or one of his biggest assets. 4.3 strikes landed per minute. Landed 153 against Michael Johnson, 238 against Donald Cerrone, and he has very good cardio, which allows him to maintain that high-output pace. Not that he does it every fight, but still you can see those numbers. If he puts that type of pressure and pace on Conor McGregor, how's he going to hold up? Look for Nate to flash that right jab routinely. Keep it in his opponent's face. Keep sticking it out there and, crack, 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 bang, bang, bang. 50%, 20%, but still it's doing damage. I'll throw a little front kick to the body. Probably not the best technique, especially if he throws it out there kind of lazy-like against Conor McGregor. At best, when he's moving forward and putting his punches together in big combinations. When he's getting backed up, as was the case against Rafael dos Anjos and against Benson Henderson and against Josh Thompson, he is not the same. Does not have the good volume striking, which very few people do. Seemed incapable of keeping up with Dos Anjos' output and variety of striking once Dos Anjos sat in and was aggressive, and the movement of RDA was making it very tough for Nate to land his strikes. When he fought Michael Johnson, I had a counterbet on Nate Diaz, even though I picked Michael Johnson. There were a number of things I kept looking at. I'm like, these are tailor-made things that Nate Diaz can exploit. For example, Johnson, kind of subpar cardio, it showed up. His submission defense is certainly a question mark, which made it so he couldn't shoot for takedowns, so the threat of being submitted took that weapon away, and also his questionable chin. Nate buzzed him a couple times, and that certainly took a little bit of the edge off. Diaz, he doesn't pose a major wrestling threat to Conor McGregor, which is huge, and I think Nate's going to be on the other end of the power equation. How does he keep Conor at bay? Well, he has to exchange and land and use that jab and just stay right in Conor's face. And don't let him kick. Keep inside the kicking range. Land strikes. Keep it going. And hopefully wear Conor McGregor down into rounds 3, 4, and 5. That's his key to win. But the thing is, can he do it without taking too much damage? And McGregor hits awfully damn hard. I think he's too diverse. And I think he moves way too well for what Nate Diaz is going to bring to the table. Doesn't matter how much ninja shit Nate brings to the table, I think Conor's going to be able to get the better of the striking exchanges. Josh Thompson was having a lot of success versus Diaz with movement and diversity of striking. That head kick that hurt him put him down. I think Conor keeps him moving backwards, targets his legs, targets his body, creates openings by being diverse, lands that straight right again eventually. I think I referred to it as a left before, but I think it's the straight right. And my prediction is Conor McGregor to defeat Nate Diaz by TKO. So those are my 5 main card predictions for the upcoming UFC 196 event. I've been taking longer with my breakdowns because people wanting me to slow down, and I guess the videos are still getting watched despite the fact they're pushing well over 30 minutes. So I'm grateful for that. Again, thank you for tuning in as always. Check out my preliminary predictions. Check out the bet packs. Subscribe. It's usually the best value. Save a few dollars here and there. I think you might save 15 or 16 bucks depending on how the math works out for this card. So certainly worth doing it. As always, thank you for going to my website. I'm very grateful for all the patronage I get from my fans, and they call me on my bullshit, which is absolutely fantastic. And as long as you do it in a respectful manner, I certainly will reciprocate. Nonetheless, we get a break now. I'm kind of grateful for that 3 events in a row. Got a big day coming up in my life. Talk about that more soon. Talk to you later, guys. Bye-bye.